Measures to address the homeless problem in the area where the killings took place. CBS News' Andrea Klein-Thomas joins us live from Chinatown with more. Andrea?
Oh, Chris and Mary, Mayor de Blasio is now saying that he is committing more resources to help get homeless people off the streets. For it to be successful, city leaders say it could take hundreds of tries and take months by licensed professionals. Starting today, mental health outreach teams will be sent to Chinatown to conduct psychiatric and substance abuse evaluations and provide other social services to assess the needs of the most vulnerable on the street. More officers will also patrol the neighborhood.
I think de Blasio said he had a handle on it, but he got to try to help the people that's on the street who don't want to go inside. They seem to be getting the worst end of the stick.
The move is in response to the bludgeoning death of 4 homeless men as they slept on Bowery and East Broadway early Saturday morning. A 5th man remains in critical condition. Accused killer Randy Santos had nothing to say as police led him out of the precinct in handcuffs. Investigators believe the attacks were random.
I've been homeless myself, and I think that could have been me. It's just like to be there sleeping and then to go out like that.
Officers found the 24-year-old shortly after the vicious rampage. They say the murder weapon, a large metal object, was still in his hand. The suspect's friend, who asked not to be identified, said Santos was working in construction and cleaning after moving from the Dominican Republic a few years ago. He had become homeless after being kicked out of his parents' apartment.
They were having arguments and stuff. The mother was calling the cops on him, getting him out the apartment. He looked like he was losing it for a couple of days.
Apparently, Santos's family tried to get him psychiatric help.
I think what happened was he was very stressed and homeless, and he didn't have nowhere to go when he was going through a lot of problems in his mind.
Now back out here live, you see a makeshift memorial here marks the spot where one of the men were killed. Later this morning, there's going to be a vigil to honor all of the lives lost. Meanwhile, Santos is behind bars. He's facing murder charges. He'll face a judge again on Friday. Reporting live from Chinatown, Andrea Klein-Thomas, CBS 2 News.
When we think of the derelicts of this world, people that are just washed up in life, people who, what did the dictionary say? It said, they're neglectful of duty, delinquent, negligent, vagrant, bum, no permanent home, no permanent means of support. They're lazy, they refuse to work, right? When we think of the homeless derelicts of Tempe, for example, okay? And I like to ride my bike around as a hobby, and I see a lot of the derelicts when I'm out riding my bike. And, they're often drunk, addicted to drugs, they're carrying around a lot of stolen property. And newsflash, carts aren't for sale. You know what I mean? Like, when you see somebody pushing a shopping cart, that's a stolen item right there. Okay? So, you see a lot of these derelicts, and you know what? You'll see certain common denominators. Like, for example, when you see them eating and drinking, it's always junk food. Virtually always. And they leave their trash everywhere. And they don't finish it. Okay. Now, let me just park it on this for a little bit. People make excuses about their situation. They make excuses about their condition. And it's better to just figure out what the weaknesses are in your life and fix them and fix your life and get on track, get yourself to work. And yeah, look, are there people that are legitimately in need? Of course. There are people who are legitimately in need, but let me just go on the record and say 99% of the homeless population in Tempe and in Phoenix, Arizona refuses to work, and that's why they're in the condition they're in. Right. They refuse to work. You can't get these people. You can offer them jobs, you can offer them opportunities, and look, so many programs are available. I mean, Tempe and Phoenix have a ton of programs where they can go and they can be trained, they can get a job, they can go to and be fed and clothed and housed. I mean, there are all kinds of programs to get these people back on their feet. They don't want to. They want to be drunk. They want to be on drugs. They want to lay around all day. They want to steal and do whatever. This is why they're in the condition that they live in.
Hey guys, what up? Total Control 871. As always, there's a mountain of information to cover on the topic of homelessness. Alright, so I definitely wanted to cover the massacre that happened in New York City. 4 homeless men, while sleeping, were bludgeoned to death, and a 5th critically wounded. Allegedly, I believe that Santos guy was homeless himself. I really try my best. I'm going to be trying to narrow the scope of the material that I cover, because I don't want to constantly recover the same thing over and over. We see what happens when homelessness is left to fester. Things like this happen, whether the perpetrator was homeless or not. Our victims were homeless when they could have been housed for a fraction of the cost that's associated with being homeless. Our second clip is good old Pastor Steve Anderson. He's back at it. That was a 2-minute excerpt. I'll link down below his full hour sermon. I've listened to it. What I found interesting about his sermon is that he even makes sure that he builds in a way of, in other words, I don't want to hear the excuses. I don't want to hear the excuses. He tries to say that if you make excuses, then that's what you're doing. You're making excuses. And of course, Steve Anderson is not homeless. Steve Anderson has lived a privileged life. That's not to say that he hasn't put in legitimate hard work. He will never ever come to understand homelessness. When you listen to the entire hour-long excerpt, components of his argument counteract each other. He likes to talk a lot about the fast food angle quite a bit. I don't think this guy, he hasn't really made up in his mind if he wants to be a life coach guru or a religious guru or he's completely out of touch. Matter of fact, even in the thing where he talks about the price of fast food in relation to market fresh from a supermarket, he tries very hard, and I think his own congregation even kind of say that, you can get this shit for just a couple of bucks, and he refuses to believe that. And of course, he's completely oblivious to everything associated with buying market fresh food. And of course, when you to point these things out to him, well, then there you go. You're making your excuses. He even invokes the Bible to say you're making excuses. His Bible verses that he uses to fortify his argument, he'll tell everybody, turn to a chapter and verse, read one sentence, preach for 10 minutes, and then tell them to turn to another chapter and verse, preach for 10, 15 minutes there. So you've got this patchwork quilt gospel Frankensteined together. You're not giving the gospel. You're just simply jumping around the Bible, reading excerpts and sentences to echo your own opinion. So this isn't the gospel. This is your opinion, and you're just simply reading a couple of sentences here and there. You're gonna have to forgive me. Massive log jam in the head. I've been dealing with some health issues. I might talk about that in a different video. I just haven't been feeling very well, so we'll cover that later on, perhaps. So these people who know nothing of homelessness, the dangers, we can be beaten and killed in our sleep. And of course, de Blasio, the same tired thing. He dumps more money into engineering a lawnmower that can cut wet grass. More money of the same. However, when I go to vet my own argument, I do indeed begin to wonder how much of the homeless population can be ushered into a home like this, and how many cannot. Let's see, I will use a medical surgical analogy for this first part. You're on the table, you're a gunshot victim, surgeons got you on the table, operating, saving your life. All of a sudden, an artery starts spurting blood. Now, if you were awake, you're not interested in the argument. Was the gun perforated your artery, or did the surgeon's scalpel slip perforate your artery, causing this blood to start spurting? You're not interested in the argument of who is guilty, The very tippity top of your concern, of your priority list, stop the fucking bleeding now. That's the only thing that you're concerned about. I truly believe that that's where we need to focus on the homelessness crisis, stopping the bleeding. Meaning people who are falling into homelessness as we speak. Every day, every week, every month, there's a brand new batch of homeless people that are made. These people need to be caught before they are exposed to the multi-months, multi-years, multi-decades of homelessness, which results in the psychosis of our little boy who was punched, had his tooth knocked out, or our homicide victims here who were bludgeoned to death. And of course, it isn't always psychotic homeless people who do that. It is very much indeed the middle class who will beat us to death or set us on fire or any other random means of killing us because they don't see us as human. How many of us homeless people can be salvaged? So I hope I'm keeping my focus here. I'm going to switch metaphors now from our surgery to, of all things, podiatry. There's a long story to it, but I went to see a podiatrist once. I was working 2 full-time jobs, for all you people who say that we're so lazy. 2 full-time jobs, security at the Hilton and Tropicana, 2 casinos that are right next to each other. I'm working 7 days a week, and I think it was it 5 of those 7 days I'm doing 16-hour shifts? And anyway, point is that it took a toll on my feet. And after visiting with the podiatrist, weirdly, why does it take so long to get an appointment with a podiatrist? I mean, is there really that high demand? Or stay on focus. Okay, focus. The ultimate point in my comparative analogy that I'm making here is that one thing I learned was that it would shock you, rough, callous skin on your foot. It would shock you as to how little of it actually should be removed by a podiatrist, by the way. I had my grandmommy, Lord rest her soul, she told me many, many, many years ago, never take a razor blade to your feet. Always let a podiatrist do it. She was right. But anyway, creams, ointments, bandages, and even the correct type of socks to wear, it would shock you as to how much of that rough, callous skin that you thought was unredeemable could not be saved. Oh, surely he should have removed that with his I don't think it's a scalpel, whatever the tool is called. Surely he should have removed it, and it would shock you. Wow, it actually redeemed. It actually became soft and supple again. When I broke this leg, the foot was, a lot of you could probably relate to this. Your foot comes out of that cast, you know. A thin layer of dead skin will come off. You know, it'll come off. And I remember I was literally, yes, I'm that flexible. I brought my foot up to my lap and I was like rubbing my foot on my face. I was like, I can't believe how soft it is. It was literally like a baby's ass soft. Bring this sucker home now. Analogy. How much of the homeless can be made soft and supple? Because we are battle worn. We are hardened, crusty. We are damaged. How much of us can be redeemed? How much of us can be returned to the workforce? Because God knows in so many of these nonprofits, they love creating these ridiculous job training classes. And there, as far as job training goes, because of course Steve Anderson, they're all lazy, they don't want to work. Of course, he doesn't want to hear anything about we lack identification, we have criminal records from a variety. That's a whole different thing. How many of us in and out of jail because of tickets we couldn't pay, because of crimes, survival crimes that are committed, crimes associated with addiction. So survival, addiction, inability to pay tickets, poverty crimes. So that's all shackled around the homeless's neck. And Steve Anderson simply wants to gloss over that as if it doesn't exist, as if that is not a hurdle that we face. So there is that. And then, you know, excuse me, I am eating holes. So there is our legal, and then you have the medical. Legal, you know, identification, criminal backgrounds, and then the medical. Getting these broke down bodies up and running. Now that's medical physical. You're not even talking about medical mental and addiction. Okay? What time have I got? 20, it's 17. I might do this as a two-parter. How much of the homeless can be made soft and supple? How much of the homeless can be reintroduced into our workforce? And how much of the efforts into doing this is just wasted money? Return to work. Return to slavery is what a lot of it is. I've already spoken in our last episodes about how I busted my fucking ass. How capitalism doesn't come through on its end of the bargain. Okay? I could so go off into a union rant right now. Capitalists, they hate unions. They like to do a lot of union busting. Always talking about how it should be your individual merit, but of course, that's a fucking lie, you know. I've already, like I said, I've test-driven conservative and I've test-driven liberals' way of life, and I have found them to be both wanting in many regards. Okay, and the union, the American Union, that is heavily dominated by white men now. Okay. Heavily dominated by white men, and of course now we see the union and the GM and oh my God, it's the longest running. I can't help but wonder, did the American Union engineer its own demise? Think about it. The whole premise to a union is to be united. We're stronger together, and yet what you ultimately did was keep large swaths of minorities and women of all races, white included, out of your unions. There is a reason why higher the wage, higher the white count, lower the minorities. There was, on one of my homeless things and whatnot, companies secured a contract, $100,000 for 3 months of work for cleaning up human waste in Los Angeles. It's on YouTube and one of the stories. And the guy, they interviewed him, that's a worker. You would think he'd be like, oh, man, I gotta clean some of the nastiest shit and syringes and human waste. And he had a big smile and, yeah, I want to help people. I want to this, that, and the other, da. It's because you're getting $30,000 for like 1 month of work. Okay? Anyway, so, and yeah, that kind of goes back to our Steve Anderson. Of course, he's going to think everything's honky-dory in the workforce. He's a white man. He knows nothing of hunger. He knows nothing of slave wages. He goes on in that, thing of his, that sermon of his about, he goes on in it about a lot of stuff. But, yeah, here, let me show you something real quick. Shut my light off. I'll see if I can keep the focus. This is a little Rich Kids Go Homeless. This particular guy, Middle Eastern guy, big Obama ears, I found him interesting. Basically, the premise, light back on. Excuse me while I make sure I'm in focus. Focus. And I'm near, I don't have my glasses on, so I don't know if my hand is out of focus or if it's just my eyeballs that are out of focus. All right, hopefully I'm okay. Rich Kids Go Homeless, I highly encourage you to watch the series. It's all rinse and repeat. As a matter of fact, it's kind of comical as the film crew does nothing to intervene, unless you're in danger. And they all do the same thing. They all come onto it with the same premise. Oh, I can be off the street. They got 3 days to get themselves off the street. They'll go and get the variety pack of snacks, like a Costco or BJ's or Sam's Club, big variety type thing, and sell snacks at train stations, bus stations. It's an interesting idea. You can do that if you want. And then, as I'm watching, I already know how it's going to end. They accrue their money, and they think they've got it. Yeah, man, I got this. I got enough money for the hostel, because that's their goal, to get off the street. Because it's their rich kid premise that these people don't have to panhandle, they don't have to sleep on the street, be in view. If they just simply worked and did something, they could take care of themselves. And of course, when he goes into the hostel to rent his room, he has no identification and can't rent shit. Okay? And then, of course, put addiction on top of that. If you're dope sick and, if you want to help people, then giving the finger wagging lecture, you should have never gotten yourself into that thing. That's not helping. So not helping. Like the mouse says, keep the cheese. Just let me out of the fucking trap. And that's basically all they want. My time here is 24. Yeah, Steve Anderson simply believes that everything is a snap. He has it shopping carts is stealing, but then he also wants to talk about how the homeless always eat junk food. Okay, well, Steve, isn't water going to be needed for washing dishes? Oh, you're making excuses. Everything I would say to Steve Anderson, he would call it an excuse, not a legitimate obstacle. Okay, soap, detergent, water, pots, pans, all this stuff that's needed. Oh, and come on, get it together. And let's not forget a lack of refrigeration, you know. So how are you going to keep things refrigerated? To prepare everything that you take for granted in your home. You know, I've already discussed this with you guys. Steve Anderson doesn't want to acknowledge any of this. The homeless, how much of our homeless are redeemable? Because I'm kind of going in between these two topics. People who think that the situation can be remedied. Because I want to give points where points are due, because I don't want to do a second part, and I'll keep it as a one part. I'll wrap with this, I guess. I'll wrap with our Australian homeless millionaire takes to the streets. I'll put his thing down below. His whole conservative view, again, the same thing, you know, you can get off the streets, blah, blah, blah. I've seen these homeless challenges time and time again, and they always end up cheating. Homeless in Huntsville, this guy couldn't even go without his designer coffee for one morning, you know, and on and on. Our homeless millionaire Australian who claims to have done drugs, kind of like our Streets of Plenty documentary. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. I really don't know. But the point is that he ends up breaking his anonymity several times throughout his experiment, that he kind of leads you to think that he was there for 4 years. It wasn't 4 years, it was just 1 month, and even that's allegedly. And so I give him his points where he gets his points. He gets himself, because he thinks that all you need is a shave and a haircut and a new suit, and you're off and running, and you can get everything that you need and whatnot. I said, okay, I'll tell you what, because I was talking to him in the comment section. I tell you what, I'll give you a point. It is true. There are indeed ample haircut people out there who donate haircuts, donate suits. Okay, so you got that all fine. And then he ends up ambling around from one pub to the next pub trying to get work as a bartender or some shit. He's got no identification. Once again, the lack of ID, something Steve Anderson would say is just bullshit. So he can't get hired. He's a fairly good-looking guy and whatnot, but you don't have any identification, so it's all for dick. However, he does end up using those masculine charms of his ultimately, but he has to cheat. Comes across outreach workers, breaks his anonymity. I'm actually a millionaire. I'm doing this thing, blah, blah, blah. She's like, oh, you are? Okay. Well, then go here, get this work and whatnot. He ends up calling some homeless people who he had already prior broke his anonymity, promised them tens of thousands of dollars each. And he now gets on a phone, something that he shouldn't really have, if you're being homeless, calls them and says, I need help cleaning this house. And, of course, you haven't gotten your money yet, just that he promised you. So, of course, obviously, you're going to come and help. A real homeless person wouldn't have because he also spoke to, he may have been trans, a homeless person with a lot of physical disability. They walk with a cane. And so many of the homeless have physical disabilities, so they would not have been connected. They would not have gotten the inside hookup to go and clean this house if they had, because we don't have an anonymity to break. We can't say we're millionaires. That's the dryer. And we don't have a posse to call in that owe us all these favors because we promised all this money. What time have I got here? Promised all this money, and he calls in these favors, and they come and they bang the house out. Now, one thing I do give him credit for, he did prove something, and I let him know in the comments section, because the house was positively rancid. We're not talking about a house that needed sprucing up. We're talking so disgusting, you're running to the window, sticking your head out, throwing up because it's so foul inside. It is indeed true. If a job is horrid, disgusting, and arduous enough, then yeah, you will get hired. No ID. Under the table. So I give them that, and of course you've got some leverage there to work with, so that you're not necessarily working for a slave wage. If you want this house cleaned, I'll do it. So both parties understand that we have each other over a barrel. You probably figure he's got no ID. There must be something going on in his life. Either you don't got it or you don't want to show it, one or the other. And you're over a barrel because you're a property owner and you need this house cleaned ASAP. It's horrid, it's filthy, it's disgusting. So I can give you a good discount and, you know, we work with each other. So I give him his points. But again, he needed backup, he needed posse, he needed a crew. He needed favors to call in that we homeless don't have. And of course, he took his very, very able body for granted. Do I want to do a part 2? I don't know. No, I guess I'll wrap right here. I'm sorry if I'm making you dizzy with that. But yeah, Steve Anderson simply, he takes a great deal for granted. He would have every excuse that I mean, I also wanted to talk about the situation of forced early retirement. Self-obliviate. I might have to keep that for another episode. But yeah, how many of the homeless can be made soft and supple again? I guess I'll simply have to leave it there. There's always so much to say. Total Control 871.